Ma'am, this is the State Department calling regarding your diplomatic passport application. We need you in Washington by Monday for your briefing before your assignment to Geneva. The voice on the other end was crisp, professional, and completely surreal. I stood in my childhood bedroom, still wearing my waitress uniform from Murphy's Diner, staring at the peeling wallpaper I'd grown up with, trying to process what I'd just heard. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Through my window, I could see the same main street I'd walked down every day for 28 years. The same faded storefronts, the same rusty water tower with Millbrook High Class of '98 spray painted on the side, the same group of men who gathered outside Peterson's hardware every morning to solve the world's problems. This was the town that had shaped me, defined me, and, according to everyone who mattered here, would contain me forever. My name is Elena Rodriguez, and I've spent my entire life in Millbrook, population 2847, tucked away in the forgotten corner of rural Nebraska. Most people here knew me as Eddie's daughter, the girl who worked double shifts at the diner to help pay for her father's medical bills after his accident at the grain elevator. They knew me as the one who never quite fit in, who spent too much time with her nose in books, who asked too many questions about places that existed beyond our county lines. Growing up, I was the kid who collected National Geographic magazines from the library's discard pile, who memorized the capitals of countries most of my classmates couldn't pronounce. While my friends planned their futures around marriages to local boys and jobs at the few remaining businesses in town, I dreamed of something bigger, something that felt impossible from where I stood, surrounded by endless cornfields and the weight of low expectations. My father, Eduardo, had immigrated from El Salvador in the 1980s, seeking the American dream in the heartland. He found work, found my mother Sarah at the county fair, and settled into the rhythm of small-town life. But he never stopped telling me stories about the world beyond Nebraska, about the family we'd left behind, about cultures and languages that painted life in colors I'd never seen. My mother, born and raised in Millbrook, loved those stories but always followed them with gentle reminders about being realistic, about appreciating what we had. When I graduated high school as valedictorian, the guidance counselor, Mrs. Henderson, called me into her office. "Elena, you're bright, but college is expensive, and there aren't many opportunities for someone like you around here. Have you considered the community college program for dental hygienists? It's practical, and Dr. Morrison might hire you after." Someone like me. I knew what she meant, even if she didn't say it directly. A Hispanic girl from a working-class family in a town where dreams were supposed to be modest and marriage was supposed to be the ultimate aspiration. But my father had planted seeds that Mrs. Henderson couldn't uproot. That summer, while working at the diner and saving every penny, I discovered something that would change everything. The local library had gotten new computers with internet access, and during my breaks, I started exploring online courses. I found language programs, international relations certificates, and something called the Foreign Service Officer Test. The more I read, the more a plan began forming in my mind. I enrolled in the state university, choosing to commute the hour and a half each way rather than live on campus. Officially, I was majoring in business administration, something practical that wouldn't raise eyebrows in Millbrook. Unofficially, I was building a completely different foundation. I took every international studies elective available, learned Portuguese and French through online programs, and spent my summers not at the lake with friends, but in intensive language immersion programs I found scholarships for. The town watched my college years with a mixture of pride and pity. Pride because Eduardo and Sarah's daughter was making something of herself, and pity because everyone assumed I was wasting my time on fancy education when I'd eventually return home anyway. "She'll be back," they'd say at the post office or the grocery store. They always come back. This town gets in your blood. It was said with the kind of certainty that comes from watching generations repeat the same patterns. My mother worried constantly. "Mija, you're working so hard, but what's it all for? There are good men here, good families. Mrs. Peterson's son just got promoted at the bank. You could have a nice life." She meant well, but her definition of a nice life felt like a beautiful cage to me. My father understood better, though he worried too. "Just don't forget where you come from, Elena. The world is big, but family is everything." During my junior year, I took the Foreign Service Officer test in Omaha, telling no one except my parents that I was going. I studied for months, memorizing everything from international trade policies to diplomatic protocol. When I passed the written exam, I felt like I was carrying a secret that could either change everything or disappoint me beyond repair. The oral assessment came next, then the security clearance process that seemed to take forever. While waiting, I graduated and took a job at the diner, which felt like stepping backward but was necessary to help my family and maintain the facade that I was settling into Millbrook life. People were pleased. See, Elena's got her head on straight now. All that college didn't ruin her after all. They saw me serving coffee and taking orders, assuming this was my peak, my final destination. They had no idea about the forms I was filling out in secret, the background investigations, the polygraph tests I drove to Denver for. My relationship with Marcus Henderson, Mrs. Henderson's nephew who'd returned from college to run his family's insurance business, became the talk of the town. He was handsome, stable, and exactly what everyone expected for me. Marcus was a good man, but when he talked about our future, it involved white picket fences and block parties and anniversary dinners at the same 3 restaurants. He bought a ring during my senior year and had been hinting about proposals ever since. "Elena, you know I love you, right?" he'd say, holding my hand across the table at Romano's, the closest thing to fine dining Millbrook offered. "I want to give you everything, a house on Maple Street, kids who can grow up safe and loved like we did. Isn't that what matters?" And part of me wondered if he was right, if I was chasing something that didn't exist, if the dreams my father had planted were just fantasies that would leave me empty-handed and alone. The pressure intensified when my application moved to the final stages. I had to travel for additional interviews, making excuses about visiting college friends or helping my aunt in Lincoln. Each lie felt heavier, but I couldn't bear the thought of explaining my real ambitions only to have them crushed if nothing came of them. The town was already buzzing about Marcus and me, about when we'd announce our engagement, about how our children would be the perfect blend of his family's local prominence and my father's work ethic. Then came the medical examinations, the final interviews, the waiting that stretched for months. During that time, I threw myself into life in Millbrook with desperate intensity. I organized the church fundraiser, helped coordinate the annual Corn Days festival, and even agreed to chair the high school reunion committee. It was as if I was trying to convince myself that this life could be enough, that maybe everyone was right about this town getting in your blood. But late at night, after the diner closed and the streets went dark, I'd sit in my room and research Geneva, Switzerland. I'd look at pictures of the United Nations building, read about international conferences and diplomatic protocols. I'd imagine myself in those halls, representing my country, being part of conversations that mattered on a global scale. Then morning would come, and I'd put on my uniform and smile at the same customers who'd been coming to Murphy's for decades, and the dreams would feel as distant as the mountains I'd never seen. 6 months ago, Marcus officially proposed during the Corn Days festival, right in front of the whole town. The ring was beautiful, traditional, and exactly what every girl in Millbrook dreamed of receiving. I said yes, because saying no would have required explanations I wasn't ready to give, and because part of me had started to believe that dreams deferred might be dreams denied. We set the date for next spring, and suddenly everyone had opinions about flowers and venues and the kind of life we'd build together. The wedding planning consumed every conversation. Mrs. Henderson helped design invitations, my mother started shopping for dresses, and Marcus's family began talking about expanding their business to include me. I was being absorbed into a future that felt predetermined, inevitable, and suffocating. But I smiled and nodded and pretended to care about centerpieces, while inside, I was drowning. Last month, when the final background check concluded and my security clearance was approved, I received a letter that I hid in my college textbooks. It informed me that I'd been selected for the Foreign Service, pending final medical clearance and assignment. I cried when I read it, tears of joy mixed with terror about what it would mean for everyone I'd loved and disappointed. Now, standing in my childhood bedroom with that phone call still echoing in my ears, I realized that the moment of truth had arrived. Monday in Washington, then Geneva. The life I'd built in secret was about to collide with the life everyone expected me to live. I looked down at the engagement ring on my finger, then out at the town spread below my window, and wondered how you tell the people who love you that you've been preparing to leave them behind all along. The next morning, I woke up with the weight of my secret pressing against my chest like a stone. I had 3 days to figure out how to tell everyone that the life they'd planned for me was about to shatter into pieces. I started with the person I thought would understand best. Dad, I need to talk to you about something important, I said as he sat at our kitchen table, reading the morning paper with his coffee. My mother was already at her shift at the school cafeteria, which gave us privacy. His weathered hands folded the paper carefully, and he looked at me with the same patient attention he'd given me since childhood. "What is it, mija? You look like you haven't slept." He wasn't wrong. I'd spent the night staring at the ceiling, rehearsing conversations that all sounded impossible in my head. I got accepted to work for the State Department, the Foreign Service. They want me in Washington on Monday, and then I'll be assigned to Geneva. The words tumbled out faster than I'd planned, and I watched his face carefully for his reaction. His eyebrows rose slowly, and for a moment he was quiet. Then a smile spread across his face, the kind of smile I hadn't seen since I'd graduated valedictorian. "Elena, that's incredible. I knew all that studying would lead somewhere amazing. Geneva? You'll be representing our country?" "Yes, Dad. It's everything I've been working toward, but I haven't told anyone else yet. I don't know how to tell Mom or Marcus or—" I trailed off, seeing the understanding dawn in his eyes. "Ah," he said softly, "the wedding." "Everyone has expectations, Dad. They think they know who I am and what I want. How do I tell them I've been planning to leave all along?" He reached across the table and took my hands in his. "Elena, when I came to this country, people told me I should be grateful for any job, any life I could build. They said dreaming bigger was foolish. But I dreamed of giving my daughter opportunities I never had. This is those dreams coming true." His support gave me courage, but I knew he would be the easy conversation. When my mother came home that afternoon, I tried to ease into the topic, but her reaction was immediate and sharp. "What do you mean, the State Department? Elena, you have a job here, a wedding to plan. Marcus has been so patient with you, and now you want to run off and play diplomat?" She set down her purse with more force than necessary and began pulling dinner ingredients from the refrigerator with jerky movements. "Mom, this isn't playing. This is a career I've been building toward for years. I'll be working on international policies, helping manage relationships between countries. It's serious work." "Serious work is being a good wife and mother. Serious work is building something stable with someone who loves you. Marcus loves you, Elena. Do you know how rare that is? Do you want to throw that away for some fantasy about traveling the world?" The word fantasy stung because it echoed my own fears. "It's not a fantasy, Mom. I passed all the tests, the background checks, the interviews. They chose me out of thousands of applicants." "They chose you to do what, exactly? Sit in meetings and pretend you're important? Elena, be realistic. You're from Millbrook, Nebraska. You work at a diner. People like us don't just waltz into international careers." Her voice carried the weight of every limitation she'd accepted in her own life, every dream she'd trimmed to fit circumstances. "Maybe people like us don't usually get these opportunities, but I did. I earned this, Mom." "Earned what? A chance to be alone in some foreign country where nobody knows you, where you'll have no family, no real connections? Elena, you'll be miserable. Mark my words. You'll be back here in 2 years, and Marcus will have moved on with someone who appreciates what he offers." That evening, I walked to Marcus's apartment above his family's insurance office. The climb up the narrow stairs felt like walking to my own execution. Marcus greeted me with his usual warm smile and a kiss on the cheek, but I could see the confusion in his eyes when I didn't melt into his embrace the way I usually did. "You seem tense, babe. Wedding stress getting to you? My mom has some ideas about the flowers if you want to hear them." He led me to his small living room, which was decorated with furniture inherited from his grandmother and high school football trophies that still held places of honor on the bookshelf. "Marcus, we need to talk about something." I sat on the edge of the couch, my hands clasped so tightly my knuckles were white. "I got offered a job in Washington with the State Department." His smile faltered, and he sat down heavily in his recliner. What kind of job? Foreign Service Officer. I'd be working in embassies, helping manage diplomatic relations. It's what I've been studying for, what I've been working toward. My voice sounded stronger than I felt. Working toward? Elena, when did you work toward this? You never mentioned wanting to work for the government. I thought you were happy here, happy with us. The hurt in his voice was unmistakable. I've been taking tests and courses for years, Marcus. I know I should have told you, but I never thought it would actually happen. I never thought they'd actually choose me. So what does this mean? You take some government job for a few years and then come back? Can you transfer to the Omaha office or something? He was grasping for solutions that would keep his world intact. Marcus, if I take this position, I'll be stationed overseas, Geneva first, but then other countries. It's not temporary, and it's not something I can do from Nebraska. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. When he spoke again, his voice was different, harder. So you're telling me that you've been planning to leave me, leave us, this whole time? While I've been talking about our future, you've been plotting your escape? It's not an escape, Marcus. It's a career. It's something I've dreamed about since I was a kid.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Dreams? He stood up abruptly, pacing to the window that overlooked Main Street. Elena, dreams are fine when you're 18, but you're 28 years old. You're engaged. You have responsibilities, people who love you. You can't just abandon all of that for some government job that probably pays less than you think and will have you living in dangerous places. Geneva isn't dangerous, Marcus, and this isn't about money. Then what is it about? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been lying to me for our entire relationship. You let me propose, you helped plan our wedding, you let my whole family fall in love with you, all while knowing you wanted to leave. The accusation hit home because there was truth in it. I didn't know for sure this would happen. The process takes years, and most people don't make it through. I couldn't tell you about something that might never materialize. But it did materialize, didn't it? And now you're choosing them over me, over us, over the life we've built together. His voice cracked slightly, and I realized he was fighting back tears. Marcus, I'm not choosing against you. I'm choosing for myself, for my future. Your future? What about our future? What about the house we looked at on Elm Street? The kids we talked about naming? The life we planned together? He turned back to face me, and I could see the boy I'd known since high school, the one who'd never wanted anything more than to build a simple, happy life in the place he'd always called home. Those were your plans, Marcus. You talked about them, and I listened, but I never said they were my dreams too. So what am I supposed to tell people? That my fiancé decided she was too good for Millbrook? Too good for me? The hurt was transforming into anger now, and I could see him building walls to protect himself. You could tell them that I got an opportunity to serve my country, to do meaningful work on an international level. You could be proud of me. Proud? He laughed bitterly. Elena, you're destroying our relationship for a job that will probably last 2 years before you realize you made a mistake. You're throwing away something real for something that sounds impressive but will leave you alone and regretful. The conversation continued for another hour, but the lines were drawn. Marcus couldn't understand why I would choose uncertainty over the security he offered, and I couldn't make him see that his security felt like suffocation to me. When I left his apartment that night, I knew our engagement was over, even though neither of us had said the words yet. Word spread through Millbrook faster than I'd anticipated. Small towns have their own communication networks, more efficient than any social media platform. By the next afternoon, I couldn't walk down Main Street without people stopping me with opinions about my situation. Mrs. Henderson cornered me outside the post office, her face pinched with disapproval. Elena, dear, I hope you're not seriously considering this government nonsense. Marcus is devastated, absolutely devastated. Do you realize what you're throwing away? His family has roots in this community going back 4 generations. You could be part of something stable, something lasting. Mrs. Henderson, I appreciate your concern, but this is an incredible opportunity. The Foreign Service only accepts a small percentage of applicants. Opportunity for what? To be alone in some foreign country where they probably don't even speak English properly? Elena, you're a small-town girl. This diplomatic world isn't for people like us. You'll be in over your head from day one, and when you fail, you'll have burned every bridge that could bring you home. Pastor Williams stopped by the diner during my shift, ostensibly for coffee, but really to offer his perspective. Elena, I've been praying about your situation, and I feel led to share some thoughts. God has blessed you with a loving man, a community that cares about you, and the opportunity to build a Christian family. Sometimes what looks like a bigger opportunity is actually a temptation to abandon God's plan for our lives. Pastor Williams, how do you know God's plan doesn't include me serving my country overseas? Maybe this is exactly where I'm supposed to be. Child, God's plan for women is clearly outlined in Scripture. We're meant to be helpmeets, to support our husbands and raise godly children. This diplomatic career would put you in positions of authority over men, in situations that could compromise your testimony. I urge you to pray seriously about whether you're following God's will or your own prideful ambitions. Even customers I'd served for years felt entitled to share their opinions. Old Mr. Peterson shook his head sadly while I refilled his coffee. Elena, I hate to see a young person make such a foolish mistake. That government work is all politics and corruption. You'll lose your values, your sense of right and wrong. And for what? To sit in fancy meetings and pretend you're making a difference while the real world goes on without you? The weight of their disapproval was crushing, but it was my mother's tears that almost broke my resolve. She cried every morning over breakfast and every evening when I came home from work. She alternated between pleading and anger, sometimes within the same conversation. Elena, please just think about what you're doing. You're breaking Marcus's heart, you're embarrassing our family, and you're chasing after something that will never make you happy. I know you think you want this, but you don't understand what you're giving up. When you're alone in some foreign country, missing Christmas with your family, missing your nieces and nephews growing up, you'll realize that home is where happiness lives. Mom, I might get married someday and have children. This career doesn't mean I can never have a family. A family? Elena, you'll be 30 before you know it, then 35, then 40. Foreign men won't want to marry an American diplomat, and American men won't want a wife who's never around. You'll have a career, but you'll be alone. Is that really worth it? By Friday evening, I felt like I was drowning in other people's fears and limitations. The entire town seemed invested in convincing me that my dreams were foolish, that I was making the biggest mistake of my life. Part of me began to wonder if they were right. Maybe I was being naive. Maybe I was throwing away something real for something that would ultimately disappoint me. I sat in my car outside Murphy's Diner after my final shift, knowing that Monday morning I would either be on a plane to Washington or surrendering to the life everyone else had planned for me. The engagement ring felt heavy on my finger, and the weight of disappointing everyone I loved pressed against my chest like a physical ache. How do you choose between the people you love and the person you're meant to become? Saturday morning came with a clarity I hadn't expected. I woke up before dawn and drove to the old cemetery on the hill outside town, where I could see all of Millbrook spread out below me in the early morning light. The place looked peaceful, almost beautiful, with the fog rolling across the cornfields and the church steeple catching the first rays of sunlight. But I realized as I sat there that peaceful and beautiful weren't enough anymore. My phone rang while I was sitting on the stone bench my father had installed years ago as a memorial to his own father. The caller ID showed a Washington number I didn't recognize. Ms. Rodriguez, this is Deputy Assistant Secretary Catherine Morrison from the Bureau of Human Resources. I wanted to personally congratulate you on your assignment and discuss some details about your posting. Thank you, I managed, still somewhat surreal that this was really happening. Elena, your file is impressive. Your language proficiency scores, particularly in Portuguese and French, are exceptional. Your cultural competency assessments rank in the top 5% of incoming officers. Geneva specifically requested you based on your background in international trade policy and your thesis on economic development in Latin America. They're looking forward to having you on the team. As she spoke, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just a job offer or a lucky break. These were people who had evaluated my actual capabilities and found them valuable. They weren't concerned about whether I was too small town or whether I belonged in their world. They'd already decided I did. There is one thing I need to confirm, Secretary Morrison continued. You'll be working directly with the Trade and Economic Affairs section, and there's a possibility of assignment to the embassy in El Salvador within your first 3 years. I know from your file that you have family connections there. Would that be of interest? My breath caught. El Salvador, my father's homeland, the place of the stories that had shaped my childhood dreams. Yes, that would be very much of interest. Excellent. We'll see you Monday morning for orientation. And Elena, welcome to the Foreign Service. You're going to do extraordinary things. When I hung up, I knew there was no more wavering, no more second-guessing. I was going to Washington on Monday, and I was going to Geneva after that. The girl from Millbrook, Nebraska, was about to become a diplomat representing the United States of America. I drove straight to Marcus's apartment. He answered the door in his weekend clothes, looking like he hadn't slept much either. We'd agreed to meet this morning to make our final decision, though I think we both knew what that decision would be. I'm taking the position, I said without preamble. I leave for Washington Monday morning. He nodded slowly, like he'd been preparing for this moment. I figured. I've been thinking about what you said, about how these were my plans and not necessarily yours. I guess I never asked you what you actually wanted because I assumed I knew. We sat in his living room one last time, and for a moment, it felt like we were the teenagers who had first fallen in love, before expectations and traditions had complicated everything. I'm going to miss you, he said quietly. I'm going to miss the version of us that might have been. I'll miss you too, Marcus. You're a good man, and you'll make someone very happy. Just make sure it's someone who actually wants the life you're offering. We cried a little, and we hugged goodbye, and when I left his apartment, I felt sad but also free, in a way I hadn't experienced since childhood. Sunday was my last day in Millbrook, and I spent most of it with my parents. My mother had moved past anger into a kind of resigned sadness, but my father was quietly proud. He helped me pack my single suitcase, which seemed absurdly small for a life-changing move. Mija, you know we love you no matter what, right? Your mama is scared because she loves you, but she'll understand eventually. I know, Dad. I love you both too, and I'll be back to visit. This isn't goodbye forever. I know, but it is goodbye to who you were here. When you come back, you'll be someone new, someone bigger than this place. That's what I always wanted for you. That evening, I returned Marcus's ring to his mother personally. Mrs. Henderson was icily polite, but couldn't resist one final lecture. I hope you realize what you've done, Elena. You've broken that boy's heart for a pipe dream. Mark my words, you'll be back here within 2 years, and Marcus will have moved on. Then what will you have? I'll have a career representing my country, Mrs. Henderson. I'll have experiences and knowledge and the satisfaction of knowing I followed my dreams instead of settling for someone else's. Dreams don't keep you warm at night, young lady. Dreams don't give you grandchildren or a stable home. You'll learn. Monday morning arrived gray and drizzling, which seemed appropriate for my departure from a town that had never quite known what to do with me. My parents drove me to the Omaha airport, and the 3-hour journey was quiet but not uncomfortable. We were all processing the magnitude of what was happening. As we pulled up to the departures curb, my father turned to me with tears in his eyes. Elena, I am so proud of you. You are braver than I ever was, and you are going to do things I could never imagine. Call us when you can, write when you have time, but don't look back with regret. My mother hugged me fiercely at the security checkpoint. Be careful, Mija. The world is bigger and more dangerous than Millbrook, but it's also more beautiful. I love you, even though I don't understand you. I was crying as I walked through security, but they were tears of gratitude rather than sadness. These people had loved me the best way they knew how, and now they were letting me go. The flight to Washington felt like traveling to another planet. As the plane lifted off and Nebraska disappeared below me, I pressed my face to the window and whispered goodbye to everything I'd ever known. When we landed at Reagan National, I was no longer Elena Rodriguez from Millbrook. I was Elena Rodriguez, Foreign Service Officer, United States Department of State. Orientation week was a whirlwind of briefings, training sessions, and meetings with people who spoke in acronyms and seemed to exist in a world where international crises were daily occurrences and global travel was routine. I felt overwhelmed but exhilarated, like I was finally in a place where my knowledge and interests were not only valued but essential. On Thursday of that week, I received another call that would change everything. I was in my temporary housing, reviewing materials for my upcoming assignment, when my phone rang. Ms. Rodriguez, this is Ambassador Patricia Hawkins calling from our embassy in Geneva. I wanted to personally welcome you to our team and discuss your role in our upcoming trade negotiations with the European Union. Thank you, Ambassador. I'm honored to be assigned to Geneva. Elena, I've reviewed your file extensively, and I have to say, your combination of language skills, economic policy background, and cultural competency is exactly what we need for these negotiations. Your thesis on economic development strategies in emerging markets caught the attention of some very senior people here. We're expecting great things from you. As she outlined my responsibilities, I realized I would be working on policies that could affect millions of people, negotiations that could shape international trade relationships for years to come. This wasn't just a career, it was a chance to be part of something genuinely important. The following Monday, I was issued my diplomatic passport.
Holding that small blue book with the golden eagle on the cover, I felt a transformation that went deeper than career advancement. I was now officially a representative of my country, authorized to conduct business on behalf of the United States government in foreign nations. The girl who had been told she'd never leave Millbrook was now carrying a passport that would open doors around the world. That evening, I called my parents to share the news. My father cried when I told him about the passport, about Geneva, about the possibility of working in El Salvador someday. Elena, your grandfather would be so proud. He used to tell me stories about diplomats who visited our village when he was young, how important and respected they were. To think his great-granddaughter would become one of them. Dad, I want you and Mom to visit me in Geneva. I want you to see what this world looks like, what I'm becoming part of. We will, Mija. We absolutely will. 2 weeks later, I was on a plane to Switzerland, watching the Atlantic Ocean disappear beneath me as I flew toward my new life. I thought about the people back in Millbrook, going about their daily routines, probably not thinking much about the girl who had left to chase impossible dreams. I wondered if Marcus had started dating anyone new, if Mrs. Henderson was still predicting my imminent failure, if my mother was sleeping better now that the initial shock had worn off. 6 months into my assignment in Geneva, I received an unexpected email from the Millbrook County Tribune. A young reporter named Jessica Walsh had reached out, wanting to do a story about local success stories. Ms. Rodriguez, we'd love to feature your achievements in our upcoming issue about former residents who have gone on to notable careers. Would you be available for a phone interview? During our conversation, Jessica told me that my story had become something of a legend in Millbrook. People were talking about the girl who had gone from serving coffee at Murphy's Diner to representing America in international negotiations. Some were proud, some were skeptical, and some were quietly wondering if they had underestimated their own potential. What would you say to young people in Millbrook who might be afraid to pursue dreams that seem too big for our town? Jessica asked. I'd tell them that the size of your dreams should never be limited by the size of your hometown. I'd tell them that the world is bigger and more welcoming than they might think, and that there are people out there who will value their talents and perspectives in ways they can't imagine from where they're sitting right now. When the article was published, my mother sent me a copy. The headline read, "From Main Street to International Stage, Local Woman Becomes U.S. Diplomat." The photo they used was from my high school graduation, side by side with my official State Department portrait. According to my mother, the article sparked conversations all over town. Young people started asking questions about college applications and career options beyond what had always been available locally. Parents began reconsidering their assumptions about what was possible for their children. And a few people, my mother reported with obvious satisfaction, had to eat their words about pipe dreams and small-town girls who didn't know their place. The best part, though, was the letter I received a month later from a 16-year-old girl named Maria Santos, whose family had moved to Millbrook from Guatemala. She wrote that reading about my journey had convinced her that her own dreams of becoming an international lawyer weren't too ambitious. She wanted to know what courses she should take, what she should study, how she could prepare for a future that might take her far from Nebraska. I wrote back immediately, and we began a correspondence that reminded me why I had fought so hard to leave Millbrook in the first place. Not because I hated it, not because I was too good for it, but because I knew there were young people there who needed to see that the horizon extended far beyond the county line. They had said I'd never leave that town, but as I signed my letter to Maria with my title, Elena Rodriguez, Foreign Service Officer, U.S. Embassy, Geneva, I realized that leaving had been just the beginning. The real victory was becoming someone who could reach back and show others that they could leave too, if that's what their hearts demanded. The embassy had called about my diplomatic passport, but more importantly, I had answered. 2 years later, I was back in Nebraska for the first time since leaving for Washington. But this wasn't a return home in defeat as so many had predicted. I was accompanying Secretary of State Jennifer Morrison on her tour of agricultural states to discuss new international trade agreements that would benefit rural communities. And Millbrook had been specifically chosen as one of our stops. The irony wasn't lost on me as our motorcade pulled up to the community center where I had attended countless school assemblies and town meetings. The same building where Mrs. Henderson had once told me to lower my expectations now hosted the United States Secretary of State, and I was part of her official delegation. As we entered the packed auditorium, I spotted familiar faces throughout the crowd. My parents sat in the front row, my father beaming with pride while my mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Marcus was there with his new fiancée, a local teacher who seemed genuinely perfect for him. Mrs. Henderson sat near the back, her expression unreadable. Secretary Morrison delivered remarks about how the trade agreements I had helped negotiate in Geneva would directly benefit corn and soybean farmers throughout the Midwest. She spoke about opening new markets in Europe and South America, about the economic opportunities these deals would create for rural communities that had been struggling for decades. Then she did something unexpected. I want to recognize one of our finest Foreign Service officers, who not only helped craft these agreements, but also calls this community home. Elena Rodriguez exemplifies the American dream and proves that talent and determination can emerge from anywhere in our great nation. The applause was thunderous, and as I stood to acknowledge it, I saw something remarkable happening in the faces around me. Pride was replacing the skepticism I had faced 3 years ago. Young people were looking at me with possibility in their eyes instead of resignation. After the formal program, people approached me with a different energy than before. The pastor who had once questioned whether my career aligned with God's plan for women now wanted to discuss my work with refugee resettlement programs. The customers who had dismissed my ambitions as foolish now asked detailed questions about international markets and how they might benefit local farmers. But the most meaningful moment came when Mrs. Henderson approached me near the end of the reception. She stood quietly for a moment before speaking. "Elena, I owe you an apology. I thought I was protecting you from disappointment when I tried to convince you to stay. I see now that I was protecting myself from admitting that maybe my own dreams had been too small." Her voice carried a weight of regret that made my chest tighten. "Mrs. Henderson, you don't need to apologize. You were looking out for me the way you knew how. No, I was limiting you the way I had been limited, but seeing what you've accomplished, knowing that you helped create opportunities for this community from thousands of miles away, I understand something I didn't before. Sometimes the best way to serve your hometown is to leave it and then reach back to lift it up." As our motorcade prepared to leave Millbrook, I watched the town recede in the distance once again, but this time it felt different. I wasn't escaping from something, I was carrying something with me. The values, the work ethic, the understanding of what small communities need that I had learned here were now part of how I served my country around the world. 6 months later, I received official confirmation of my next assignment, Deputy Chief of Mission at the U.S. Embassy in San Salvador. I would be returning to my father's homeland, not as the child of an immigrant seeking opportunity, but as a representative of the country that had given our family that opportunity. When I called my parents with the news, my father's voice broke with emotion. "Elena, your grandfather used to say that every generation should climb higher than the one before. You haven't just climbed higher, mija. You've built a ladder for others to follow." The girl they said would never leave that town had not only left, but had become someone who could open doors for others, someone whose very existence proved that geography doesn't determine destiny. And perhaps most importantly, I had learned that you don't have to choose between honoring where you come from and pursuing where you're meant to go. The best diplomats, I discovered, are bridges between worlds. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.